Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's Answers for You session on strategies for engaging with industry, from small businesses to global companies. My name is Lundell, and I am standing in for David in today's session as facilitator. We are excited to have a panel of speakers with us today from the College of Engineering, Dr. Gerard Cote, Dr. Balakrishna Haridas, and Dr. Farjan Sasangohar. Their experiences with companies, both large and small, offer a very unique opportunity for us to learn about connecting with industry in impactful ways. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on our website within 3 to 5 business days. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the discussion. I'll be collecting them for the Q&A towards the end of today's session, and I will hand it over to our panelists.
All right. Well, great. And thank you for coming, everybody. I've asked Farzan and Bala to join me today. And what we would like to do is basically spend about the first 35, 40 minutes covering some basics of how do you engage with industry. We're going to start with about a 3-minute introduction to each of us, so you kind of know what our backgrounds are and what our experiences are and why we're doing this particular session. Then we'll jump into about 10 minutes each on working with large companies, working with small companies, and working with startups. We all have experience with all, but we're kind of going to parse it out. And Bala will talk about large companies, then Farzan will talk about small companies, and then I'll talk a little bit about startups. So with that, and then we'll open it up for questions, 20 minutes of Q&A. If there's clarification questions throughout, then just feel free to unmute and ask. This is very informal. We just want to kind of let you guys all know we exist and that we're here to help and happy to follow up with anybody that wants to follow up with what we talked about today. All right, and so with that, I'll start. My name is Jerry Cote. I'm in the College of Engineering. I've been here for a better part of 35 years at Texas A&M. Started as an assistant professor way back in the day, back in '91. But I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial bent and spirit, and so that's kind of been my background. Even as an assistant professor, I went off and started with a small company for a sabbatical early on in the early 90s. So moved up the ranks, was department head for about 10 years in Department of Biomedical Engineering. Now I run a center for remote health technologies and systems and do research in that space, handheld wearable devices primarily. And my other hat is I'm in the TEAS office for the College of Engineering, and I run 2 different programs here. One is on industry engagement and entrepreneurism. These are new office as part of the engineering research office. And the other one is health and human performance. And so happy to talk about that. And all of us are engaged with the innovation system and Sam Kim and his group over there, as well as had meetings with Henry Falmero. And so we're really trying to push the commercialization and industry engagement part of A&M in the recent years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bala, and you can give a 2-minute talk about yourself. Oh, I also spun off about 8 companies, 4 of which I talk about. The other 4 kind of went. So and one got bought out by Medtronic. So I have a little bit of a history there. Go ahead, Bala.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate Sponsored Research for hosting this, and thank you, Jerry, for inviting me. My name is Bala Haridas. I'm a faculty in biomedical engineering. I've been at Texas A&M for over 10 years now, prior to which I spent 25 years in Cincinnati before coming south. I'm a little bit of a different beast, if you want to call me that, in terms of my background. So I spent a lot of my career in industry R&D, all the way from an entry-level engineer to chief technology officer in small, medium, and large companies. And somewhere through the middle of that career, I found out that academia is a great place for someone like me to really join and contribute to advancing technologies that eventually make it to products. But by and large, the bulk of my career has been in the medical technology space, about 34 plus years and counting. But I did actually start my career as a civil engineer who worked for an aerospace company before I came to the United States and trained myself in mechanical engineering and eventually biomedical engineering. Like Jerry, I've also had several startups. I've now on my fifth startup, I've sold two of them. And there's two more that actually spun out of Texas A&M. So in fact, the reason I moved to A&M was to help move engineering startups out from T's into the real world. And one of those was Shape Memory Medical, which was founded by my colleague who's retired now from the department, Duncan Maitland. In terms of what I do at A&M, by and large, my research lab focuses on pediatric devices. We're anchored by a grant from the FDA, a P50 grant. We are in our second 5-year cycle, and we've built a pediatric device consortium that combines our engineering expertise with a network of children's hospitals led by Texas Children's, but we cover essentially the Southwest Midwest region of the United States, and we have about I think 8 companies also partnering with us. My portfolio is basically federally funded, 75%, 25% of my portfolio is funded by large companies. So I've learned a thing or two in the last 10 years on, how to attract funding from large corporations. So that's where we are today. So I'm more than happy to share at least my learnings, having been on both sides of this ecosystem, on the industry R&D side as an R&D leader, but also now on the academic side, not only running my own research lab, but also assisting faculty in doing so. I spent about 5 years also as the head of TEAS's commercialization entrepreneurship office. So that allowed me to meet a lot of people across engineering, but also from other colleges and agencies across the A&M system. So gave me the chance to learn a lot about the A&M system as a whole and how you have this orchestrated symphony between the academic units and the agencies, and how you can leverage the agencies to do interesting industry-focused government-industry collaborations as well. So I'll stop right there and hand it back to Jerry.
All right, Farzan.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Farzan Sasangohar. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Industrial Systems Engineering. Really glad to be here in this panel talking about strategies for engaging with industry. Thank you, Jerry, for your invitation. My background is in a field called human factors engineering and user-centered design. In simple terms, I focus on improving performance, safety, and usability in complex systems that have humans operating or supervising in them. A lot of my work's been in high-risk industries, mainly healthcare, but also work in oil and gas, defense-related domains, and transportation. And in everything I do, I really look at this complex interaction between people, technology, and organizations, which is heart and soul of what human factors engineering is about. Before joining Texas A&M, and even during my doctoral studies, I worked in large corporations. So I've seen industry from inside. But then throughout my career here at Texas A&M, I had a chance to collaborate with a sizable range of partners, industry partners, anything from small innovation-driven companies and startups to nonprofit organizations to larger corporations. Collaborations have been mainly funded by federal funding, but also industry-sponsored projects and contracts, and also partnerships and collaborations without funding to have mutual interest, if we had mutual interest in translating our research to practical tools and solutions. What to me is the most interesting about industry engagement is that you see your work move outside the lab, go beyond theory to actually influence people, real world outcomes. So I'm really interested in that translational research side of industry engagement. Um, Obviously, industry is very different than traditional academic research. You almost need a different kind of project management skill. You need to align timelines. You need to manage expectations differently. The rigor and practicality need to be balanced. And these are really important challenges we're going to talk about today. In terms of work I've done in the past with small businesses in particular, a lot of these are medical device companies. And the type of expertise I provide to these companies is helping them design with a user-centered design mindset or evidence-based design mindset. We've helped with requirements analyses, prototyping for digital products, and mostly user evaluation and testing. Looking forward to share some of the lessons I've learned, including some successes we've had and some of the challenges and pitfalls. So I look forward to our conversation. Thank you, Jerry.
All right, great. Thanks, Farzan. And so you can see we've got a pretty diverse panel here, from more junior faculty, senior faculty, and industry faculty. So I'm going to pause real quick here. If there's any questions that anybody has, feel free to put them in the chat or just pipe in right now. Otherwise, we will move on. I put a little thing in the chat that you don't have to wait till the end to ask questions. So we're really here to kind of help and you with any burning questions you might have about how do you interface with industry and how do you interface within the university system with industry. And so just feel free to ask as we go along. But not seeing any in the chat, we'll move right to the next part, which I think is going to be Bala, who's going to talk particularly about large company engagement from his perspective on both sides of being the one being solicited as the CTO of companies, as well as the one that is doing the soliciting and what they might want to hear or see. Go ahead, Bala.
Thank you, Jerry. I could probably spend a lot of time talking about this, but I'll keep it to about 10 minutes. The thing that I've at least learned from actually doing technology acquisition from the industry side, one thing that stands out for me is industry, especially good companies, actually have a pretty good pulse on where academic research is. In terms of the state of the art. Unfortunately, the converse is not true. And that is one area that I think we can improve, and there's a lot of room to improve in being able to understand where the industry trends are. I think we, as a faculty as a whole, across the university, I'm sure we're outstanding in analyzing where's the envelope of research, right? And where does that need to go further to solve problems that we anticipate exist today, but the future is where the solutions will emerge from the work we do. What we don't do as good a job of is understanding where companies are in that technology cycle. And you might have heard of the famous S-curve model for technology maturation. Companies, they actually do their homework. When I was head of R&D at a large surgical devices company or chief technology officer of a novel biomaterials platform company, we actually did a lot of homework on who are the researchers, not just in the US, but across the world, who are at the forefront of these areas where we might be able to build a collaboration. And so one of the areas that I've actually been pushing hard after coming to A&M is helping not just students, but also faculty think about how large companies think about innovation. So when you think of large companies' current products, and they want to improve existing products, which what we would call as low risk incremental innovation. But what they're trying to do at the end of the day is bring new differentiated value to the marketplace, right? So whether that means improving the existing technology or incorporating new technologies into products, essentially moves that market expectation or pull upward. And oftentimes that type of innovation, can be done quickly, but the level of innovation is what we would call incremental. When we talk about high risk disruptive innovation, the goal at the end of the day is to really define a new type of market pull dynamic. So that's the type of thinking and mindset the techno-commercial groups at companies think about. And oftentimes they are constrained by, time it takes to get there, right? And the resources they need to execute. So let me give you a good example. So if you're at a large company, and let's say you're deep tech large company and your current sales are 2 billion a year, and you want to grow at say 10% a year, right? So if you want to grow at 10% a year in about 7 years, you'll double your revenue. So the question is then, as a technologist, how do I meet that requirement while continuing to serve high value products that benefit society? It could be, in the case of healthcare, it could be patients. In the case of consumer products, it could be better products that reduce the friction in terms of day-to-day, quality of life use of those products, etc. It's consumer electronics. You have new value propositions you can explore there, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we're trying to put products out there that improve your quality of life. I think we can all agree on that. So the question is so how do you go from 2 to 4 billion? A lot of the times the incremental innovations might only get you, a few hundred million extra, and maybe better sales, better marketing, trying to find adjacent markets. You might grow from 2 to 2.5 billion or so. Then that still leaves you a gap of 1.5 billion to get there, right? So that is one variable that, if you're a technologist at a company, you will be constrained by that. And when you're searching for help from academia, keep in mind that's the backdrop of what the technologists are trying to do. Is they're trying to access new markets, improve, the quality of existing products so customers are happy, etc. So that is one aspect. So what do we do? What can we do better, right? So, for instance, one of the things that I do is if a company is reaching out to us, the first thing I will have our folks and my collaborators do is do our homework. What we mean by homework is most large companies, how they are performing in terms of R&D is actually public knowledge. All you need to do is go read their annual 10K shareholder filings to the SEC and read their annual reports. And in their annual reports, you'll see things like, what does their balance sheet look like, but also how much money are they investing in R&D? Are they investing 1% of the revenue in R&D? Are they investing 5%? Are they investing 10%? That immediately tells you how research heavy the company is, right? And then you go deeper into the analysis, somewhere in those annual reports, you will see what are the headwinds the company is seeing in terms of technology, right? What are the gaps in the technology that they will have to solve to get there? So it's sort of a customer discovery type approach, but you're really getting into the DNA of how a company is performing. And that will help inform you and how your research can meet some of those challenges. So at the end of the day, this is what we call portfolio strategy. So when you think of a company that's a large company that's got a large number of products, they often think of, okay, what is my portfolio doing in terms of serving customer needs today? Where are the gaps? And the gaps may be across the industry, right? So the industry itself may not have technology mature enough to address the gaps that exist, but there may also be competitor gaps. So their competition may have, products that do certain things that their products can't. So there's two types of portfolio opportunities. One that, allows a company to catch up and lead the competition. Another that basically lifts the entire industry up as a whole. And so those are the areas that you get to learn when you analyze a company that's approaching you for help as an academician. So this idea of industry, which does technology scouting and acquisition, sometimes from academia or a lot of times from academia, depending on the type of industry. On the academic side, we should be doing a similar type of scouting in terms of understanding where the industry is. Another good example is I go to a lot of conferences, academic as well as industry trade shows. So one of the things I see is behaviorally that's different is we will see principal scientists or senior scientists from industry in academic meetings, but the converse is not true. You don't see academicians in trade shows. So if you go to the Consumer Electronics Show, you're not going to see much academician presence, right? So but those are the places where you can really understand where is the industry moving in terms of trying to solve problems on a horizon that might be 3 to 5 year horizon, not 7 to 10 year horizon or beyond, which is what most of us in academia think about. So I'm just sharing some, in an organic way, different things. So in terms of do's and don'ts, when you're engaging industry, you have to do your research and understanding, where they stand relative to their competition. Where do they want to go aspirationally as a company on a 3 to 5 year to 7 year horizon? And that tells you how healthy the company is because you'll see, what is their R&D investment? What is their cost of manufacturing? And what is their bottom line profit, right? So you can say if they're hurting because of a certain technology gap that they have, you can make that assessment. The next thing is listen to them first. So oftentimes in academia, we tend to go out and present what we do first to the industry partner. I've tried sessions where we flip it and say, okay, let's make it an even session. Why don't you folks from industry talk about what you're trying to solve? And then we will follow with how our research might meet those gaps, right? As opposed to us just presenting what we do. Because believe me, they've done the homework on what you've done. They've read your papers. They know exactly where your lab, focuses on and how successful you've been. So that's, those are some of the things that I wanted to share. The other thing, the last couple of points I will make is, when you engage with industry, there's many different levels of opportunity depending on what the company is trying to do. So you have to be a little bit flexible in terms of your expectations. So, and anything that you do with industry will be all about milestones and how fast you can execute to get to those milestones. So be prepared for weekly, bi-weekly touch points with your partner on the industry side, because that's sort of how they work. The other thing is, your initial projects may not be a year-long project with funding for a graduate student, the traditional model. It might be a 2 to 3 month project where you're leveraging your expertise to learn something that they don't know about their existing technology or something new that they're evaluating. So, but that's actually I've found is a very good entry point to start building trust and credibility with them. And then you play the long game and say, okay, you have to be a little bit of a marketer yourself, where you can show them how your research combined with the company's ability to, do the scaled up R&D can actually be beneficial, especially when you're pursuing public-private partnerships, government industry, joint collaborations, etc. Right? So the carrot for them is by working with us, they can also access R&D dollars that they don't have normally access to, and they can offload their R&D budgets by working with academia, not just funding academia, but also collaborating with academia, and getting access to the types of government funds that exist for joint industry academic partnerships. The last thing that I would sign off with is IP is important, but it's not the only thing. So a lot of the times it's the know-how that you have that industry is interested in. And so if you can convince them that the know-how that you have will solve their current problems, but also open new doors, the IP part of it can be negotiated by collaborating with our innovation office. And they're actually doing a lot of good work right now to structure their IP engagement procedures and processes with external partners. So I'll stop right there and give this mic back to Jerry and Parson. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Bala. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Oh, in what ways do you have a student engagement outside the lab and academic setting?
So I can take that, and maybe Jerry, both of you do it. So maybe the three of us can answer this. So right now in my lab, we have, like I said, 25% of our work is funded by industry, 75% is federal. And I like that balance because you have only industry, then, that's feast or famine situation. So I like to keep that balance. But the work that we're funded by industry, I have all my lab staff on projects actively presenting to the industry partners. We're actively discussing. Actually, we're trying to do a new model where some of my students and my research staff can be on site at the company over summer working on the same project. But then in doing so, they're interacting in a team-based project environment that may be very different and will be very different from what they see in our research lab. So that's definitely something that we're actively trying to do. We've also got in our graduate program, especially in the master's program, we have a mandatory internship requirement. So they actually have to go out to industry. I know that Jerry has done some interesting things with PhD students, so I will let him speak about that and Farzan as
well. Yes. So there's different programs within the federal government. There's an NSF program called the intern program. So if you have NSF dollars, National Science Foundation dollars, you can apply for this intern program. They give away a few hundred of these every year. And it's for PhD level students to go and work with industry or national labs, or we even had one go to the FDA, but just doing some experience outside the lab. And so I was able to send my PhD students, one of them I sent over to Scotland for 3 months. Another one I sent to a medium-sized company. And another one I sent to the FDA, and invariably, almost every one of those experiences, even for a 3-month, turned into a paper and sometimes into a patent. And the one with the industry experience, that was unique in that he didn't want to move there for 3 months. So what he did was he would take a 2-week over there, build some of the devices, bring the devices that the company he was building with the company back to the lab, test those devices in our lab, and then bring them back to the company. And so there was this back and forth, give and take. But that intern program is, they give you about $50,000 for the student, and it could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to do an internship outside the lab. Some companies will support students as well in the intern program at the graduate level. That's obviously more common at the undergraduate level, and that's another way to do it. And then thirdly, there's consulting, right? And so as a faculty member, as long as you declare it and the conflict of interest and all of that, you can consult with industry outside the lab, as long as you're, the number one rule, you can't use state resources for private gain, right? So anything you're doing on consulting has to be on your own personal computer and can't use the university computer, can't use university resources. But often I've seen faculty get their students involved in the consulting, particularly legal consulting. So if you've got a legal case, a patent infringement, or some sort of a injury case, in the case of biomedical engineering, have had faculty that will have their students do some of the background work and then pay them from that consulting fee. There again, you have to be careful because foreign students would not be eligible for that because of their status. Everything has to come through the university. So those are ways to engage with the students, and they love that. Actually, most students that I've engaged with love those little short-term, engagements outside the lab to gain a lot of experience. So those are different ways. Farzan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies also have unfunded pathways and processes for student engagement. So in my case, I sought affiliation with a large hospital, Houston Methodist. If you're in healthcare, Houston is a great opportunity. So with that hospital, I was able to onboard some of my PhD students without getting paid. I just had to work on the value proposition that, hey, this is mutual interest, win-win. You get a good student, smart student coming in and doing some project, and they get to write their thesis. And through that pathway, I was able to onboard several PhD students, and that actually led to funding. So once they saw the value, they started providing fellowships for the students. So they got funded after some time. So I think these opportunities are there. We just have to seek, and a little bit of hustling is necessary to show the value and kind of smoothen the pathway.
Correct. Okay. And with that, Farzan, since you have the mic, why don't you go ahead and talk about your experiences dealing with small companies, not your own startups, but just working with other small or medium-sized companies.
Of course. So the focus of my piece is engaging with small businesses, and especially those with SBRI phase 2 level of kind of size and awards. Also some small nonprofits. Most of my industry engagements and collaborations with this size of a company has involved sharing my expertise in human factors engineering, user-centered design, prototyping, and most importantly, user testing and home studies to evaluate medical devices, for example. So one thing that differentiate these small businesses from large corporations that Bala talked about is that their highest priority is being innovative, and they're very deeply mission driven. Right? Things move very fast. They're resource constrained. They're typically under a lot of funding pressure, and people work their multiple hats. The CEO you're talking to might also be the product lead. The technical lead you're talking to may also be hitting the operations, and they typically miss, R&D. They don't have a dedicated research group. So these are realities that you have to keep in mind when you engage with these small companies, in how you communicate the value to them, how you manage expectations. So that's most of what I want to talk about today. So let's just start with the context. Context is really important here about these small businesses. We're talking about companies who often have less than 20 people employed, sometimes even less than 10. They're typically very mission driven again. They have some sort of promising technology or device or product, and they're trying to move forward towards commercialization. So their engagement with academia is mostly to seek evidence, to find and document evidence to justify more funding. And that's typically under a significant time pressure. Things can't happen too slowly. So comparing that to large corporation, that means there's typically very little bureaucracy. Things could happen fast, but also very little buffer. Decisions are happening really fast, but you also have a lot of changes, and budgets are going to be very tight. So that context is really important in how these companies should be approached, because a purely academic mindset may not work in engagement with these companies. So moving on to the first category of kind of problems. I think these smaller companies, this is probably the biggest lesson I've learned personally, is that they're not really buying a scientific method in that engagement. They're buying outcomes. They're really not buying my summative usability testing skills or lab or persona development. They're looking for reduced risk. They're looking for increased adoption. They're looking for stronger funding reports to justify more funding, more commercialization opportunities. So that needs some sort of reframing of language when these companies are dealt with. Instead of saying, I'm going to run a formative longitudinal user testing, it's much better to say something like, we'll help you identify barriers that could reduce adoption before you go to market, or improve adoption before you go to market. And we're going to help you create evidence for your solution to help actual users. So especially for SBRI phase 2 companies, this is really important. It's almost a shift in framing, going from research methods to being more strategic, to being more kind of aligned with their mission. Another important piece is quantification, especially in work that requires qualitative research. sometimes just even simple quantitative metrics would help these companies build a case for more funding and better commercialization. In our case, it's improvement in task completion times, it's reduced onboarding time, or better requirements. Those resonate very well with these small businesses. They're very sensitive to efficiency, but also cost. So let's not talk about managing expectations. And this is probably the most important factor in successful management of relationship with these small businesses. And probably the first lesson I've learned was to have a very clear scope from day one and keep revisiting that scope. These small businesses, they evolve very quickly. The visions might shift in the middle of the project. New ideas may emerge in the middle of the project. So if there's no clearly defined scope, you're facing almost endless iterations to the scope. So even simple written agreements, so if I know agreements, legal agreements are sometimes slow. And for a 1-year project, the company, you may lose that company by going through, the whole, set of legal agreements. That should be in place. But at the very least, the changes to scope, those should be documented, even in one email. So at least you scope it well and you move forward. Something related to that is to clarifying roles. When you deal with small teams like small businesses, authority is very centralized. You're talking about, it's actually not very obvious who has to sign off on certain decisions. And if you don't clarify that, you may have to present finding to one person, then learning that, there's somebody else who has to learn about this and make a decision. So you have to clarify roles very clearly, understand the hierarchy of decision-making in a small team. That's very critical. You also need to be very realistic about timelines. Research takes time. Research methods are rigorous, anything from recruitment to analysis to even ethics review and IRB. And small businesses don't necessarily understand that. They're not very realistic about timelines. So key here is transparency. It's essential to be transparent about how long it takes to accomplish different aspects of work academically. And then it's also very important to be very clear about the scope of expertise you're providing, what you can and cannot do. In my case, user-centered design and my approaches improve usability. They clarify requirements. They improve risks or reduce risks or hazards. They don't guarantee commercial success, or they don't necessarily fix a flawed business model. So this mismatch in expectation may become problematic when company has just the wrong business model, or the whole goal is commercial success, and your method is fixing another problem. So transparency and clearly defining those scopes, I think, builds better trust. So let's talk about some pitfalls. There are a few recurring pitfalls I've seen in my engagement. And one is, I think I mentioned this, resource instability. Funding can change. Staff can leave in the middle of the project. Priorities and visions can shift. So it's very important to be very flexible in engaging with small businesses. Another important pitfall is the scope creep, which is ideas are moving very quickly, and typically project leads at small companies are very hyper about it. They always ask, can we do this other thing too? Can we do this extra test? Can we do this extra kind of design? And these small additions accumulate and they become impossible at some point. So have a very clear process for adjusting scope is very important. Another pitfall is that these founders, the CEOs of small businesses, are very attached to their product. Typically, you don't see that with large organizations. I think large organizations, they're a little bit more open to ideas. Whereas in small businesses, you see a lot of attachments with products and ideas. And as soon as your scientific method shows some negativity or some issues, major issues, you might see some pushback. People may take it personally and they might push back and, push for a different method to get what they're looking for. So that's typically very difficult to deal with. I think shifting the discussions from products and kind of outcomes to evidence and evidence-based approach is really important from the very beginning. And then as part of getting optimistic about their own products and being attached to it, sometimes these small businesses rely heavily on anecdotal feedback. They showed a problem in a few pitches, they got some thumbs up and some nodding, and they're like overconfidence about the product or technology. Again, the key is to show them in a more systematic way and evidence-based research that supports, efficacy, not just a few people nodding. And that's also a very difficult dynamic to deal with. So, thinking about some practical strategies, I mentioned some of these, but first, you need to build trust very early with these small businesses. You need to take your time, do some homework to understand their hierarchy of decision making. You have to understand they're under funding pressure, and you have to understand their commercial goals. When you show that understanding early on, it builds very good trust that carries over throughout the project and the relationship. Second, you need to deliver quick wins when possible with these small businesses. If your smaller research method shows that, let's say I do a focus usability test early on with very clear actionable recommendations, that early win carries over very well and it builds better trust. Third, you want to always, with these small businesses, be collaborative, not prescriptive. And that's another big difference between small businesses and large corporations. Large corporations probably come to you because you're the world expert, world leader in this method. So it could be very authoritative. It could be very prescriptive. With small businesses, the tone is almost a little bit different. It's almost like a collaboration. I'm your team member. Instead of saying, we have evidence that this design may not work or is wrong, you want to say something like, users struggled a little bit. Let's explore some other options. Let's explore some new design together. And I think that tone matters a lot with these small teams and small businesses. And finally, you have to educate these small businesses as you go. Many small businesses are not necessarily familiar with research methods. Many are founded by very educated, even professors. So, but not every small business. So you have to briefly explain your methods in an audience appropriate language, not necessarily a technical level language. So in closing, working with these small businesses is very different than large corporations. In these collaborations, you typically directly shape a product, and you often have direct access to the top decision maker, which makes them very different than large corporation engagement. The impact is going to be very tangible, very visible. So that's very pleasing. If I can summarize the key lessons here, articulate value in business terms. Some business acumen is really important there with small businesses. You need to manage expectations early and clearly. You need to anticipate a lot of structural constraints and changes, and you need to build trust and ground your discussions in evidence. These small businesses don't need the scientific methods again, they need partners who understand their environment, who can translate the research into practice, into meaningful business impact. Thank you. Looking forward to Dr. Cote's discussion.
Great. Thanks, Farzan. Bala, anything to add there? You've done the small business thing, you're on mute.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me, Farzan, was why companies come to us, and especially in highly regulated industries, I've seen companies actually willing to see your lab publish the work as well. And I've had several great experiences in the last 15, 20 years where your publication allowed them to then use that information in their regulatory filings. So I think there are certain industries, whether it's healthcare, nuclear, aerospace, biotech, there could be opportunities where your lab can do objective, assessment research. And the good thing is the people who negotiate our contracts make sure that we retain publication rights on all the work we do for industry. We never sign something that prevents us or our students from writing papers. But the flip side of that is many companies want that because that puts them out there. I published a paper with J&J last year, and out of the blue, I got a call from their competitors saying, "Hey, we'd like to learn more about that work that you're doing." Um, and so when you negotiate these contracts, you need to make sure that you don't have exclusivity and things like that. So the contracts we have with J&J, for instance, we don't have exclusivity, meaning we're providing scientific know-how to understand how their products function, how their materials work, etc. But make sure that you don't get constrained by exclusivity as well. So.
Great.
Absolutely. I think publication helps small businesses to build a stronger case for more funding too.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
but it's a challenge to publish in smaller scale projects. Let's say a 1-year project. They're very product oriented, but we always pushed for it. Because when you have students engaged, there has to be something in it for students too. It has to kind of lead somehow to some sort of dissertation chapter or some publication. So we've always pushed for it with some success. Some companies are very much appreciate doing papers, some don't, but absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And we do that too. When I engage with small companies, we try to get a publication, and we do the follow-on work. Sometimes you don't get enough, as far as I mentioned, in the 6 months or a year that you've worked on it, but then the student continues the project and then combines it and that type of thing. And sometimes you can do that. The other thing that I would say for both large and small companies before I go into startups is facilities. Most of Texas A&M faculty have their own facilities, but then have access to wonderful facilities at Texas A&M. And so often small companies, but even large companies, so you've got the Lockheed Martins of the world that, are out there using our mock, wind tunnels and stuff like that out at Relish. And that's a large company, but then you have a small company that maybe needs an MRI machine and they don't have the funding, as far as I mentioned, to buy their own. And so they can use that. And so when you start dealing with companies, there's different ways to deal with them. And I try to break it down into 3 ways. And one is the traditional way. You get a research contract and you do the fundamental research for them, whether it's large or small. Second, you can do a fee for service, and some of your departments may or may not have that option. I know our center is set up for that, and our department has an opportunity for that as well. But that's pretty much non-IP bearing. There's not likely to be any IP come out of that, and so that and that's just strictly, hey, I want to use your MRI machine, or I have a very constrained problem, and I want you to go build this device or this widget or whatever. And then the third, as I mentioned before, is consulting. If you have the bandwidth to do that, or your students want to do that are eligible, that's usually the third type of industry engagement. And so I would encourage you all, any of those of you that are doing research at A&M, is to sell the A&M system. And I think that's where Sam Kim and some of the folks are trying to push. And so and not necessarily oversell yourself, I think, is what one of the things Farzan mentioned. But chances are, if you don't know how to do it, there's probably somebody on this campus that does. And so feel free to contact me, contact Bala or Farzan, and say, hey, I got this guy that's really interested in AI. My lab doesn't do AI, but do you know of anybody at A&M that does that? And obviously, I know some folks over in computer science that can do that, or I need a behavioral psychologist, right? And so I know a lady over in behavioral psychology that can do that. And again, that's not something I'm going to do. And so, but I think that's another thing to build trust, I think is what Farzan was saying, is that you're not so selfish to take all the resources from that company yourself. You're really trying to work with them to solve their problems. And you may be able to solve them, you may not. But there might be somebody else here, and so you can refer them to somebody. So I think that's the thing I would say with engaging with industry. So I don't see any other questions, so I'll move on to the last part of the talk. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'll just spend 5 minutes on starting your own small company. Okay. So first of all, I would say if you can avoid it, avoid it. I've started 8 of them. I loved it. The experience was awesome, but it's much easier to license. And the other thing is you can be a founder without being a C-suite executive. And I think that's something that is often preferable, right? If you're the CEO or the CTO of the companies, the technology officer or the executive officer, that's a lot of work for if you want it to be a real company, that's a full-time job. And so a lot of faculty can't manage that, right? Everybody's primary benefit or primary, I guess, asset is time, right? And if you're doing that, then you're not doing something else. So there are some unicorns out there. I've done it. Bala's done it. And a few of us have done it, but a lot of faculty are not really equipped to do that. And so I would say that you can still found a company and not have to be in the C-suite for that company. But at any rate, so I would say that if you're going to found a company, the big thing, and I think that Farzan and Bala both touched on it, is what's your market, right? I think I've seen so many, particularly in engineering faculty, that if I build it, they will come. That's not a good strategy for starting a small company. The first thing you want to do really is obviously you'll have some tech, right? Because that's your thing. And so, and what is your thing, right? And so you often hear about the razor blade model, but there are several other models out there. There's a subscription model if you're a software as a service, like a fitness gym or whatever. And there's something called freemium, which is you could look all this up online, but there's another one, direct to consumer kind of business, and so a franchise business, an advertising business, a pay-as-you-go business. There's all kinds of business models out there. The one you'll often mostly hear about is, at least in engineering, is the razor blade model, where you're effectively giving away the razor and you're making your money on the disposables, the razor blades, right? So kind of decide, first of all, what is your product? What is the thing you want to sell? It's where most of us start is, I have this crazy idea, I want to do X. But then very quickly, you have to do some sort of a market analysis. And I think Farzan hit it on the head. Often these small companies, they talk to 3 people that they know well and that they're their friends, and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And so they get this anecdotal evidence, but they do have programs like the NSF I-Core program, that's I-CORP, that you can participate in, and we have one of those here, and that's where you engage 100 customers or potential customers or experts, and really most of them try to shoot down your idea. And so it can be very disheartening in some cases, kind of like getting that grant review back that it didn't get funded, or that publication that didn't get published. But you do gain a lot of insight and information about whether your idea has legs, right? And so if you're going to start a small company, you want to definitely do that market analysis and make sure that what you're trying to develop or build has somebody that wants to buy it, or somebody that is willing to market it or pitch it. Once you've established that, then Then there's the nuts and bolts of spinning it out. There's a lot of paperwork, and there's people that can help walk you through all that. You got to register, you got to get a DUNS number, and luckily, if you go through the innovation office, they have attorneys that they'll put you in touch with. It will cost a little bit of money. The last one I spun out was like $2,500, and they did all the paperwork for me, but it's all legal, and we get our EIN. And then if you want to write an SBIR, like Farzan talked about, that's a Small Business Innovation Research Grant. Then you have to register with the federal agency and get a cage code and all those kinds of things, whether it's NIH, NSF, DOD, whatever. And so those are all the nuts and bolts of actually doing a startup. I typically do them with a graduate student or a postdoc that is hungry and still poor, and and so they can and then I can bring them in and out as a postdoc, and then if we get an SBIR, they can go work for the company because you have to be 51% employed as the PI, and so there's ways to do that, and we can walk you through all that, but I think you got to have a good product idea. It's got to have a good market, and then you got to build a good team. It's the third thing, and that team has to have somebody that's done it before, or business side, and then obviously you have to have the technical depth and expertise. But then all these other things, how do you make payroll? All those kinds of stuff has to get done. So that's what I would say in the short time I have. We got about 4 minutes left. I don't see anything else in the chat. Bala, Farzan, anything else to add on what I said on the startups? Okay. Well, without any further ado, like I said, I would say gcote@tamu.edu is my email, and so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, follow up. If you think of something crazy tonight and say, oh, I should have asked that, I'm happy to do that, and I can forward it to Farzan and Bala if
same
you
here.
want.
Yeah.
And like I say, the main thing is this sounded a little bit overwhelming, a little bit daunting, but it's actually quite fun. That's the reason we all do it, right? We like it.
Yeah.
Some of these short-term projects, early wins, you get you can make a difference. And I think when when I spun off my first company, and it's a MRI guided laser surgery, and they put the fiber in the head of a patient that had epilepsy, and the patient was seizing 3 times a day, and now is seizure free. And I like to say I had a little bit to do with that, and so there can be very rewarding to see some of these things take place. Papers are nice, and grants are cool, but and graduating students is my and mentoring is my passion, my love. But getting one of these things out there is kind of really cool too. So with that, we'll let you go.
Thank you all.
Thank you for
All right.
Thank you for joining us. It was all great information.